Joseph had much to ponder. The angel had been clear in its instruction. He was not to return to Bethlehem after all, but instead take the road to Nazareth. The instructions came as a surprise to him, as they had thought with the death of King Herod it would be safe again. Apparently not. He glanced back through the open doorway, back into the hut. Inside, he could just see his wife and son sleeping. That word had been difficult at first for him, son. But he had accepted it now. He had other sons, but this time had been different, unexpected. Joseph felt the lump in his throat turn to resolve in his heart. He would be a faithful father to the boy, blood or not. He would protect his family. Looking away, his gaze turned to the horizon in the direction he knew they were to travel. It was time to go home. Even though my dramatic monologue got interrupted, the story that we find ourselves in here in Act 4 of our Christmas story in the book of Matthew has a lot to do with coming home for the holidays. It resonates with us because in about 10 days from now, many of us will do the same, right? We will go home for the holidays, or perhaps we have family coming here to where we are for the holidays, all to celebrate Christmas together. And as you see, many of the students who are normally here are in fact gone because they have gone home for the holidays. Others have returned from far away. Perhaps you have people, loved ones in town, which is always a gift. But I want to talk for a moment about this concept of being home for the holidays. It feels like such a powerful cultural idea to us, right? We see it everywhere. In fact, I think I have a picture of a few random Hallmark Channel movies here that find themselves just completely random to us. Oh, we don't have it? Okay, that's fine. There's a bunch, maybe you've seen, whether it's on Netflix or Hallmark Channel, we find ourselves with a bunch of Hallmark movies, Netflix movies, Amazon movies, all around the idea of being home for the holidays, right? It's kind of everywhere. It's a powerful cultural idea. It's everywhere around Christmas time, right? Even our own series, if you've been coming to Summit and Daybreak, you've noticed Pastor Michael and a few of the rest of the pastors on staff, we've been preaching about this idea of being home for the holidays. And the concept of being home for the holidays is something that comes with a lot of joy to us for many, but also perhaps it can be filled with a little bit of tension. I still remember the holiday of my freshman year of undergrad. I had grown up in Seattle, Washington area, went to academy in that area. Then I went over to Andrews University across the country for my freshman year of undergrad. And throughout that year, I had a lot of conversations. I was in college for the first time. I was meeting new friends. Some of you who have been freshmen, you understand how it is. You're in the dorm. You find out your roommate is a slob. I was going to say a filthy mess. Or perhaps you find out that it is you that is the slob. You get to live on your own for the first time, get food for yourself, buy toilet paper for the first time. It's a great time. But I remember over the course of this year, I had a lot of conversations, and my worldview was shifting on some things, both religious and political. And I remember that first holiday, I came home, and I ended up in a huge debate with my dad around the dinner table, just a massive debate where he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you saw things like that now." And I was like, "Yep, I have a different opinion than you." And it was like kind of the first time, like I had arguments with my parents before in the past, but it was kind of the first time where I was like ideologically, we had a disagreement. And I remember turning to this whole big thing, whole big yelling match, where I thought I was right, he thought he was right. And here we are, it's supposed to be a happy time of family in the holidays, and it was full of chaos. Perhaps some of you have had moments like that in your families as well. And so being home for the holidays can evoke for us many different emotions. It can evoke for us a sense of joy, of togetherness, of family, of love, closeness, but also of tension, of pain, of aloneness, of feeling isolated, of anger, of old conversations in the past that have not yet been resolved, of irreconcilable differences. It is in one of these spaces of tension that we find Jesus, the Christ, in the final act of Matthew's Christmas story. And I want to read it. It begins in Matthew chapter 2, verse 19. It goes like this. It says, "But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, 'Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead.'" It continues, "And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in a place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee." So, where we find Jesus in the final act of Matthew's Christmas story is a bit uncomfortable for us. It's not in a cozy home full of tinsel and abundance of food, surrounded by presents. My mom always be making that dinner roast. If you grew up as an Adventist, you can't go wrong with that dinner roast. There has to be some kind of veggie meat in the house. My mom always makes dinner roast in this one particular way with this gravy. She's going to listen to this too, so she knows what I'm talking about, Mom. She makes this dinner roast in this gravy and has this mushrooms. It's like I don't even know what it is. The cream of mushroom sauce. I don't know what it is. It's a magic sauce. It's fantastic. But images like this of a cozy home with family and food, presents, tinsel, these are not the things we find in Matthew's tale. Rather, we find Jesus as a fugitive. We find him in exile. We find him an immigrant in a foreign land on the run for his life. Now, those of you who've been with us, you were with us last week, you remember the story of Herod, who had every single child under 2 years old killed, murdered, executed, all in an attempt to stop Jesus being born King of the Jews, to usurp his kingdom. And so here we find baby Jesus and his family, his parents, hiding in a foreign land, forced to flee a violent government, being hunted by his own people. It's a stark difference to the images of Christmas that come to mind to us today, right? I was just at the mall this past week, and right, all of the Christmas decorations are up, right? It's beautiful. There's all the lights and the Christmas trees, and the Christmas music is playing, and I always find it so intriguing to be like in a place of consumerism and by purchases, and then you just hear like silent night in the background, and you're like, ooh, interesting. How did these two things fit and how did these things fit together? It seems we are, as a culture, attempting to mesh stories that I don't know if they are compatible. Perhaps they are, perhaps they are not. And yet it all seems very benign to us, right, as we do our Christmas shopping and other things like that, which this is not a sermon about demonizing Christmas shopping or anything like that, but it is a story about the realities of human life. Here in our Western world, we find ourselves in a time of joy, of peace, of season's greetings, and yet Jesus himself, the very reason for the entire season, reason for the holiday, found himself in a place of pain. And that's really what this story is about at the heart. It's a story about fear of violence, about the real challenges of being an immigrant, about being rejected by the very people who are supposed to be your home, about being at home and not feeling like it is your home, feeling like an outsider. That's what this story is about. And so Matthew continues all the way to verse 22. He says, "And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene." Now, here's a question for us. There's a lot going on in the book of Matthew, a lot swirling around. We talked last week about how you read a gospel like Luke, which also contains the Christmas story. Luke is written specifically from someone who did investigation to present a case for Jesus to his non-believing friend, whereas Matthew is written from a Jewish perspective to the Jewish community. So he's trying to include all the intricacies of the people of Israel, of their story, of the Jewish story within. And so here we find a lot going on. I want to just break it down in a really, really simple way. So what does he mean, Matthew, when he says that this was all spoken of by the prophets so that they would be called a Nazarene, right? What is he talking about? Well, there's a couple options here, because what happens if you've read this story and then you go back, you look through the Old Testament, what happens is you find that there's not really a specific prophecy that Matthew is quoting here. And so immediately our hands could go up and be like, wait, what's going on here? Is he making something up? What's going on? And oftentimes people will read the Gospels, they'll kind of criticize them, and they'll say, well, Matthew isn't, like, what is he doing? He's not quoting anything, right? This is not cogent. This is not a scholarly piece of material. But really what we have are a couple options, what scholars believe. The first is that he's quoting from an extra biblical source, some sort of other document, maybe that's part of the Apocrypha, something maybe that's been removed from the canon, right? But most scholars don't believe that this is likely, because Matthew always cites his sources. He's always quoting whenever he quotes something. So even if he was quoting an outside document, he would have cited it. He would have said where it would come from. There's not really a single place where he quotes something and doesn't cite it. He at least mentions where it comes from. So then our other option turns to perhaps Matthew is getting at an idea that the Old Testament prophets were speaking at. Perhaps he's getting at the heart rather than the letter. Perhaps he's not quoting someone particular, but really trying to get at the heart of what all the prophets were saying, a heart of their message. Now, again, this can be tough for us because we live in a day and age where it is very easy to sit above the text and to critique it. And what's interesting about the Bible is it's an interesting document that invites us to sit beneath it. It invites us to sit under. It invites us to have ears to hear rather than to stand above. And this is a bit of a countercultural idea in our current day and age, to actually sit under an ancient document, right? Because we have an idea that, these are just ancient people, that they were primitive, they didn't really understand, they didn't have modern science. How could we ever listen to them? And yet, the ancient words invite us to sit beneath and to learn. And so here we are, sitting beneath and learning. Here we are going towards option 2, which is to try and understand, what is Matthew getting at? Well, let's talk about it. For an example, just one example I have for you. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, there is a very interesting verse where the prophet Isaiah, he says some interesting words. He says, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Now, it all seems very metaphorical, esoteric. What is he talking about? It feels like Bible nerd mumbo jumbo, as I like to call it. So what is he talking about? What's going on here? There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, a branch from his roots. Well, the prophets, what we find as we read them, Isaiah, Jeremiah especially, they have this hope that one day the line of David will be continued and one day Messiah will come. And the purpose of Messiah is that he comes in order to bring justice to the world, to bring healing to the things that are broken, to restore the world to the way it was meant to be. You see, the Bible is all about a story that the world is fractured. There's something wrong in the world, that there's a brokenness. There's a shattered shalom. It's like when I broke my iPhone the other day. I broke my phone for 3 weeks. It was a nightmare. A couple of you are rolling your eyes because you were probably texting me during those 3 weeks. I'm so sorry for ghosting you. Lo siento mucho towards you. I was not ghosting you. My phone was broken. And having a broken phone is the worst. Some of you have felt that. But this image, this idea of like a shattered iPhone screen, this is what the Bible is saying the world is like, that there's a shattering that has happened. And so the Old Testament prophets, they come to say, one day there will come a person, and his name is Messiah, and he will come to heal the shattering, that he will fix everything that's wrong. So how does this connect to us? It means that anything that we've experienced in our life, I don't know what it's been for you, but for anything that we've experienced in our life that has felt wrong, that has felt like pain, that has been an experience of brokenness, of pain, of damage, the Bible is saying that one day there will come one who will cure the pain. He will heal the broken. He will fix what's wrong. And so Isaiah is alluding to this person, Messiah, when he says, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, almost describing Jesse, the father of King David, the great king of Israel, almost describing his family like it's a tree stump, that it's been cut down, right? Because what we know from the Old Testament is that David's line kind of ended and they were no longer the kings of Israel because they were taken over. Israel was taken over. It was taken into captivity, and then in Jesus' time, it had been taken over by the Romans. And so at this point in time, no more is the line of David. No more is David's heir on the throne. But then Isaiah says, there shall come forth a little shoot. What does he mean? Just a little sprout, a little leaf. That stump that we thought was once dead, that was cut off, it is not exactly as dead as we thought. And that a little branch from the roots will bear fruit, the little branch. And so throughout the prophets, this term, the branch, became to be used for Jesus. The branch. He is the branch. Now, a little interesting, weird linguistic thingy for you guys. Oh, that word is fun, thingy. A little interesting linguistic thing. As we know, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, not English. And so what we find is this word, branch, it has 3 letters in Hebrew. I think I have them for you. It is N-Z-R. N-Z-R. I have them in English here just because it makes a little more sense for us. N, Z, and R. These are the Hebrew letters. But what's interesting is the word Nazareth in Hebrew. Pretty much most base words in Hebrew are created with 3 main consonants, 3 main letters. And what we find is the word for branch, NZR, is also the word for Nazareth. Also the same 3 letters, NZR. And so, what we find here is an interesting turn of events. That Jesus on his run, his family on the run from their own demise, from Jesus' own death, the angel says, hey, return, but don't go back to Bethlehem. Go home to Nazareth. And Matthew, with eyes that seem to be glowing, he says, look, this is him. This is the branch. This is Messiah. He's here to fix what's broken. This is him. This is the one. He sees the prophecy. And it's like he's shouting to us through the pages, any brokenness that you've experienced, any pain that you felt in your life, if you've ever felt disconnected or like something was shattered, like there was a broken iPhone screen in your life in some way, in some sense, he's here. He's finally here. The thing that we've been waiting for. Now, I think this is important to us because, again, I think we can get the idea sometimes, even as Christians in our modern culture, that Christmas is just a story about cheer. It's so easy to get the idea that Christmas is only a story about cheer. And it is a story about cheer because it's a story about incredible joy. But really, this is a story of not only about cheer, because it ends with cheer, it ends with joy. But to get to the cheer, to get to the joy, you have to go through the pain. And Jesus comes to go through the pain. Now, why does this matter to us? I truly believe that this matters to us because each one of us are walking around with individual stories. Each one of us have experienced broken shalom in our life. And again, I don't know what that has been for you in your life when we think about things that we've experienced, whether that's sickness, pain, broken relationships, family, heartache, illness. The holidays can evoke such things. But this matters to us because this story is not just a story about cheer or angels up in the sky somewhere that are disconnected to us, but really this story is the human story, recapitulated, told over again, right? This is a story about an unplanned pregnancy, right? A man with a wife who comes to him and says, I'm pregnant, but it's not your child. A teenage mother who's never experienced this before, who's told she's going to have a baby. Right? This is a flight from a country at the fear of death. This is being an immigrant in a country that you're unfamiliar with. This is being on the run for your life. This is experiencing wanting to be home, but knowing the home you could be at and go to return to doesn't quite feel like home anymore. Right? These are very human stories, very human places in our life. And so I just really believe that the Christmas story has a word to speak to any of us who have felt like there is any sort of brokenness in our life, that there is any sort of shattered shalom. It is the message that God comes to heal the pain, that God comes to heal the pain. Nothing exemplifies this more than what Isaiah says a little bit later in his book in chapter 53. It's a famous chapter in Isaiah. And he says, he leads us into a section that has come to be known as the suffering servant. And I want to read it to you. Perhaps you've heard it before. It reads like this. For he grew up before him like a young plant and like a root out of the dry ground. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. With his wounds we are healed. What is this getting at? This is getting at the idea that Messiah comes to heal the world, yes, but also to heal us. That it's not some grand tale about the world, about the big picture, but it's not just the macro, but also the micro. He comes not only to heal the earth, but he comes to heal me. He comes to heal you. He comes to take on all of the things that were separating us from God. And I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over, and in some ways I really am. But really, I think that it's important for us to remember the old story. Because once again, we live in a culture that has so made the story impotent of all of its power, of all of the darkness, of all of the pain. Right? I want to read, just to illustrate this, I hit up ChatGPT this week because I wanted to ask it about some of the most absurd Hallmark movie premises. And I want to read to you a couple. Let me read you a couple here. This is The Spirit of Christmas, a movie in 2015. It says, a no-nonsense lawyer spends Christmas at an inn to finalize its sale, but discovers it's haunted by the ghost of a hunky 1920s Prohibition-era man cursed to haunt the inn every December. Sparks fly as they team up to solve his murder because, of course, nothing says Christmas like romance with a ghost. The other one is called A Christmas Prince. This was released in 2017. A New York journalist goes undercover in a fictional European country to get the scoop on its Playboy prince. Naturally, she accidentally becomes his tutor, unearths royal scandals, and somehow falls in love with the hunky crown prince. Why do all of these contain the word hunky? Because international political intrigue pairs well with decorating Christmas cookies. The last one, single all the way. A woman tired of her family nagging about her love life convinces her best friend to pose as her boyfriend for Christmas. Chaos ensues when her meddling mother sets her up with a handsome local bachelor, forcing her to choose between fake holiday romance and realizing this BFF might actually be the one. That one didn't contain the word hunky. I read those silly little summaries from ChatGPT. Thank you, ChatGPT. Shout out to you. I read those little silly summaries as a way to illustrate really just a simple little word today, which is it can be so easy for us to get it twisted and think that Christmas is about Christmas cookies, hunky bachelors, tinsel, presents, holiday cheer. But this is a story not just about holiday cheer, but about human pain, about a collective story and a collective brokenness that unites us all, and about a God who saw that brokenness and said, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to fix what's broken. I'm coming to heal. I'm coming for you. And again, I don't know what it's been like for your life. I don't know how this year has been. Don't know how the past months have been. Don't know how the past week has been. But I know in a room this size, there is some pain. There are some hard stories because I have a hard story too in some places. There have been times in my life where I have cried out to God, God, why won't you fix this? Why won't you fix what's broken? Where are you in the pain? Where are you in the darkness? And if you have cried out to God in the same way, this story is a story about a God who says, I see you, I hear you, I remember you, I'm here to fix what's broken. I'm here to heal what's wrong. I got a little quote for you which I think summarizes it all. It's by a pastor named Tim Keller. Here's what he says. I've got it on my phone here. He says, Christmas means that we are so lost, so unable to save ourselves, that nothing less than the death of the Son of God himself could save us. Nothing less than the Son of God himself could save us. And so Christmas, yes, is a story about cheer. It's a story about peace on earth, about family, about reconciliation, about love, about a little baby who comes to heal the world. But it's also a story about a God who cared enough to enter my story, to enter your story, and say, I'm here to heal the pain. Amen.